Nearly 66 million Americans voted for a future where there are no ceilings on our dreams. And afterwards, we refused to give up on America. Millions marched, many ran for office. We kept our eyes on the future. Well, my friends, the future is here. I wish my mother and Kamala's mother could see us. They would say, keep going. Shirley and Jerry would say, keep going.
That was former Secretary of State and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton at last month's Democratic National Convention, referencing political trailblazers Shirley Chisholm and Geraldine Ferraro. Clinton writes about her own journey in American politics in her new book entitled Something Lost, Something Gained, Reflections on Life, Love, and Liberty. And Secretary Clinton joins us now. It is great to have you on the show. Congratulations on this book.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Madam Secretary, first of all, any book that borrows a line from both sides now with Joni Mitchell, that's a good book. I know already. But, you know, I actually read something in the book, and, you know, instead of starting on politics or foreign politics, I want to start on the book because it reminds me, something I read reminds me of the first time I met you and President Clinton and everybody else at the White House picnic. And, of course, we all ran against you. Hillary's a Marxist. Bill's a Marxist. Everybody's a Marxist. And after the picnic, I was asked by a conservative radio show to come on and talk about how horrible you all were. They said, well, what do you think about the president? I was like, breathed fire. What do you think about the vice president? Breathed fire. And then they laughed and go, what do you think about Hillary? I go, she's a Midwest Methodist. Their heads all exploded. I said, you want me to tell you the truth? She's a Midwest Methodist. That's what I saw in talking to her. Not a Marxist, a Midwest Methodist. And then I saw this in your book. You're reticent about talking about your faith, but you say, my faith has sustained me, informed me, saved me. I don't know who I would be or where I would have ended up without it. And you know, isn't it crazy? Even with all the political divide and all the differences, that came through in you for people who really know you. And I only met you that for 3 minutes. But that faith, that came through even then.
Wow, Joe, that's an amazing memory. And I used to love those White House picnics and Christmas parties because at least for a couple of hours, everybody was talking to each other and having fun together before they went back to their corners. And, you know, I write about my faith, my family, my friends, obviously my politics in this new book, because I do think we've got to start looking at people as the whole beings that we are. And certainly my faith, as I say, has been critical. It's been key to who I am, how I think about my life, the kind of service that I believe in. And I really appreciate the old memory that you just shared.
Yeah, it really, it's always been disconcerting to my conservative friends how much I loved you from the start. So we've noticed, Mika and I, you have an extraordinary amount of energy, and we both were really taken by your take on aging, which you say borrows a lot from Jane Fonda.
Yeah, look, I am a big believer that get up every day and live a life of joy, purpose, reaching out, spending time with people. And I always, Jane Fonda looks amazing. I just saw a picture of her knocking on doors for the Harris Waltz campaign and, just literally delighting people who came to the door, and there she was. And so she is an inspiration to me. And I really like the idea that you just keep going. You go from strength to strength. You're not the same person you were in your 20s, 40s, 60s. You're different, but you have an attitude that is built on everything that came before. And if you take care of yourself and you bring some gratitude and joy into your life every day, you have all kinds of, good years ahead of you.
So a quote from Hillary Clinton in this book on aging, it's prophetic. I don't feel old. And I love that because you keep going and you're doing all these different things from producing to you name it. When you were younger, when you were in your 20s, did you imagine having massive impact on the world over the age of 50, say?
I really didn't, Mika. I mean, I had a very clear idea about what I wanted to do, which was largely begun when I worked for the Children's Defense Fund to, help and support children, particularly abused, neglected, children with disabilities, kids in trouble. That was my motivation, and in large measure because I think I was inspired by my mother, and I write again about her because she is like with me literally every day. And I wanted to help people. I mean, and in the chapter on faith, I quote the old John Wesley saying, do all the good you can. And that's how I was raised. That's what I learned in my home. That's what I learned in my church. That's what my best teachers when I was growing up expected of me and the other kids. So it was a different time, and I miss it to some extent. I miss the idea that, children deserve our support, but they also need to be given a chance to do something for other people. And as you know from the book, I write about how kids are now so obsessed and addicted to screens that they're missing out on a lot of the day-to-day interaction that helps make you who you are as a person.
So, Secretary Clinton, you also write about the state of our politics quite a bit in the book and your reaction to some of the things you've seen over the last few years. Thinking about this campaign right now, we actually had a clip from you as you were recording your audio book that we played last week when this change came at the top of the Democratic ticket and your reaction to it. There was lots of consternation ahead of time about whether Joe Biden should stay or go. And when he made the announcement, you and President Clinton sort of stepped very quickly into the gap and said, we endorse Kamala Harris. This is a good thing for the party. So tell me about your thinking before and after. Did you think before that the president made that decision to step aside that that was the right thing to do?
Well, I, like many people, wanted the president to make the decision that was right for him and right for the country, which he did. And I've said before, it was a really selfless act of patriotism. I can't imagine the candidate on the other side giving up power under any circumstance. And President Biden did. And he immediately endorsed his vice president. And then Bill and I absolutely moved quickly to endorse Kamala as well. And we did it for a couple of reasons. One, I've known her for a number of years. I am a fan of hers. I think she has handled herself extremely well during the vice presidency, starting in COVID, under really difficult circumstances. And it's a tough job being vice president under any presidency, no matter what's happening in the country. And I had a lot of confidence in her sort of political touch and feel. I also thought it was better for the party and the country that we get behind President Biden's endorsement of her. People who talked about, let's have a contested convention, let's have some sort of contest in, 6 weeks, I think underestimated what chaos would have done to that presidential campaign and to the prospects for the Democrats. But in any event, she rose to the occasion. She's run a flawless campaign ever since she got into it. We talked to her literally right after the president decided to step aside. And I have been incredibly impressed and delighted to see the country meeting her, to see how people are responding to her, and to see the joy. You know, when I was talking to Joe and Mika and just a minute ago, I mean, look, life is hard. Politics is really brutal. It's a contact sport. And to think that the other side in this campaign wants people to be afraid and filled with anger and hatred and trying to hurt other people is so terrible and so un-American. And now we have with, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, two happy warriors, two people who will fight for us, who will work for us, and don't want us to hate each other. They want us actually to find some common ground.
So what is your assessment of the stakes of this election? I mean, you are in a very exclusive club of people who've ever run for president, let alone run against Donald Trump. So to what extent do you offer counsel or do you speak with Kamala Harris about how to run against Donald Trump, who, as you've said, is a different candidate now, a darker candidate, arguably, than he was in 2016?
That's absolutely true, Willie. You know, I've talked with Kamala a few times. I obviously talked with her before the debate because he is more incoherent. He is angrier. He is lashing out all the time at everybody. He's filled with grievance and rage. And, in my acceptance speech at the convention way back in 2016, I said, you can't trust somebody with nuclear weapons who you can bait with a tweet, because I saw that in him at the time. A lot of people didn't, or they gave him the benefit of the doubt, or they thought, hey, we've had 2 terms of a Democrat, let's try the Republicans, for whatever reason. I understand that. But now the stakes are even higher because he has a record. We have seen him try to abuse power. We have seen him try to overturn a legitimate, free, fair election. We have watched him bungle COVID and cause unnecessary deaths and pain. So he has a record. And in addition to that, he's told us what he's going to do. He is absolutely linked to this Project 2025 and all of their dark and dystopian efforts to turn the clock back on Americans' rights and the way we live and how we, look at our futures together. And he has a long rhetorical record now of making it very clear that he would be unaccountable if he were ever near the White House again.
Madam Secretary, as you just said, there's so much at stake and there's proof as to what is at stake. So those who believe in our democracy would consider this an all-hands-on-deck moment.
Right.
Military officials on both sides of the aisle, former members of Trump's administration, many Republicans have stepped up, signed letters, and even said they're going to vote for Kamala Harris. Who in the Republican Party, high up, who you think could move the meter, do you think should step up and make that same declaration?
Well, Mika, I wish everybody would. Everybody who knows the danger that he poses. And frankly, having served in the Senate for 8 years, and I've heard Joe say this on the show many times, we know that the Republicans we served with, we know the Republicans who are still there, many of them know better. And what is holding them back and making them have this allegiance to Trump, I don't, fully understand. And in the book, I write about what it would be like to having fallen asleep now and not know who won, and waking up after the election and after the inauguration and to see what Trump is doing, which is implementing his policy with military troops in the street to, grab the woman who waits on you at the diner, pick up the guy who's, mowing the grass in the neighbor's yard, not because you have any information about them, but because of the way they look. or maybe their first language. That is unimaginable, but that is what is being promised. So I would ask every Republican. A lot of people decided not to run from the Congress when they knew that they could not support Trump, and they knew that if they didn't, they'd be primaried. Let them step up. But what's most important to me are the people who have served with him. They are sounding a 3-alarm fire is possible. They are telling us they were in the Defense Department, the White House, Homeland Security, across his government. They're begging us, please, I saw him. Don't put him in power again.
Yeah, and the hope is to have a real Republican Party again. I mean, if that could be rebuilt in some way, that would be good for our democracy. And as a Democrat, I think we agree on that, which is why I wonder, members of the Bush family, Condoleezza Rice, who could move the meter and perhaps give other Republicans serving right now the permission structure to break out of this hold?
I wish they all would. I've written before about sitting next to President George W. Bush at Trump's inauguration. And instead of hearing what you expect to hear, which is, I want to be the president for everybody, it was a hard campaign, now let's pull together as Americans, the kind of things that I would have said and other people say. We heard about carnage in the streets, and we saw this dark, dystopian image of our country, which is unrecognizable. And at the end of it, President Bush turned to me and said, that was some weird shit. And so, honestly, he knew it then. We have seen all of this unfold. I'm not going to speak for him. He has to make his own decisions about public statements. But everybody who cares about this country, which I know they do, I worked with them. I was the senator from New York on 9/11. I was in the Oval Office 2 days later. I told the president what we needed to rebuild New York, $20 billion. He looked at me. He said, you've got it. And he never wavered. They love this country. They know this man who is running at the head of their party is a wrecking ball for everything we believe in. So everyone should, this is a full, hands on deck moment. And you never know what might influence somebody in their voting. I personally think Taylor Swift is, getting people to go out and register and hopefully turn out to vote. But I do know from, working on this book and writing about the stakes, our country would be unrecognizable if this man got his hands on power again. And, I love what some of the Republicans are saying who are endorsing Kamala. They're saying, look, I don't agree with her on anything. Liz Cheney is a perfect example. Dick Cheney, for heaven's sakes. I don't agree with her. But what we do agree on is we have to save our democracy first and foremost. Then we can start arguing again. We can have all the policy disputes about everything under the sun that you can imagine. But let's not let this man have power again.
By the way, thank you for bringing up one of the great George W. Bush quotes of all time. And when they commission the statue on the mall for his memorial, that will be the quote underneath his life-size statue.
It was prophetic.
He summed it up.
He summed it up well. I mean, brevity is the soul of wit. Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm curious if you would talk about January the 6th. In your book, you paint a vivid picture of what it was like inside your home. I think it was that way in ours and so many others' home. But also talk about how you had rarely seen President Clinton as discouraged as he was that morning.
As I write in the book, Joe, I went out for one of my walks. That's how I, try to keep myself a little bit saner. And I came back in to my house. I didn't have any knowledge of anything going on. And, Chelsea and her husband, Mark, and the kids were living with us during COVID. And Bill was at our breakfast table, and Chelsea was standing next to him, and they had the television on. And I didn't even know what they were watching. There were these images of the Capitol and people scuffling and fighting with police officers and scaling the walls. And, you know, Bill told me that, you know, there were rioters who were doing what they thought to be Trump's bidding, trying to interrupt the certification of the election in the Congress, and were, you know, in full riot mode. And, you know, Bill had his literally head in his hands. He just could not believe it. I was looking at a place I'd gone to work in for 8 years. I was stunned, sickened. And, you know, my daughter, who has grown up in politics and, you know, has been around people who are of different parties, but has always, you know, found ways to talk to everybody, and particularly loved the way that, you know, George and Barbara Bush treated her from the time she was a little girl. So, you know, we have very fond memories of the transition of power, the peaceful transition. And we were just in a state of deep, deep worry and despair. And like many, many Americans, watched that unfold throughout the day and wondered, where was the president? Where were the orders to end this terrible assault on our democracy? And of course, they weren't there because he was, I have to say, enjoying what he was watching on television. That's the only conclusion one can draw. And he held out hope that his efforts to intimidate, to overwhelm the legitimate constitutional process might actually work. This is a guy who believes raw power, intimidation, domination is what should be done. I saw a video clip of him just the other day praising the North Korean dictator because people stand up and salute and applaud when he walks into a room. And literally, Trump is heard saying, "That's what I want from my people." This is so foreign to who we are as a nation, the kind of values that we're supposed to hold. And January 6th was, you know, one of the worst days in American history.
And by the way, Donald Trump's still, again, promising to pardon many of the people that we see in that video desecrating the Capitol. Secretary Clinton, one of the things people who spend time around you these days note is how dialed in you are on policy, how dialed in you are on individual races across the country. You're very, very engaged. So I'm curious, I'll put you in a sort of a pundit seat for a moment about how we should be thinking about these next 40-some days of the election. What are the important states to look at? We showed some new polls this morning that shows progress for Vice President Harris versus where Joe Biden was in some of those states. But as I also pointed out, there's no celebration in the campaign. They know how tough it's going to be. What's your assessment of where things are?
I think we've made a lot of progress. We are certainly in a better position than we were before the president decided to withdraw. And I think that the challenge, as it has been for a number of elections now, is winning the Electoral College. I have no doubt that the Harris-Walz campaign, like my campaign, will win the popular vote. But I think, as we all know, that doesn't get you the election. You've got to win 270 electoral votes. I think what needs to happen is what they are doing, just more, deeper, more intensely, which is reaching out to people, both with the positive story. And, sometimes I'm asked, well, where is the policy? Well, go to the website. That's where the policy is. I had more policy than anybody had. I gave speeches about it. It was on our website. I wrote a book with Tim Kaine about it. We have lots of policy. At the end of the day, that's not what caused people to vote for me or against me. And I think the Harris campaign knows that. They know that you've got to, cross a threshold, which they have more than done, in terms of what kind of governance you're promising. But at the end of the day, this is a a contest between freedom and oppression, between democracy and autocracy, between bringing people together and further dividing us. And that's what has to be communicated every single day between now and the election. And I want to just add that I think you all do an excellent job of talking about the stakes, not just the horse race, but the stakes of the election, and painting a picture for people about what Trump is promising to do. And don't let folks get away with saying, yeah, but I'm not an immigrant. It's not going to affect me. I'm not a woman of childbearing age. Abortion bans aren't going to affect me. I'm not likely to die like that poor young woman in Georgia did because she didn't get the medical care that she needed. I'm not, LGBTQ. I'm none of those things. I think if you listen to somebody like Timothy Snyder, who I think you had on the show, and with his new book on freedom and his prior book on tyranny, there is no safe harbor from authoritarians. You can get on their wrong side without even knowing. And a lot of the people in business who say things to me like, well, I don't know. I mean, the taxes and this and that and the other. First of all, think about the future of the country and what will happen to your children and your grandchildren. But secondly, you may not be his favorite in a year. Somebody else may have given him more, not only campaign contributions, but business and financial opportunities that feather his nest. And so you think you're safe? Nobody is safe. And we got to get back to a country that is under the rule of law, not the rule of a very dangerous man and those who enable him. Because don't forget, Willie, that this is not just about electing him. It is about putting people into place who, through Project 2025, have made us very aware of the kind of country they want to see. They want us to believe what they believe. They want us to worship the way they worship. They want us to think the way they think. They want us to, ostracize people who are not like us. No. I grew up in a time when we kept pushing open the doors of opportunity. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, things that recognized our common humanity and our differences, which make us a much more interesting country. Nobody can beat America when it comes to our energy and our optimism. Our diversity is our strength. And people who want to take that away or who want to suppress it or make it feel like it's not legitimate are hurting America. They are hurting our security and our prosperity, our leadership in the world. So I think there's a lot to talk about that may hit chords with different people, and they may begin to say, you know what, I'm not going to take that chance. It's too risky. I'd rather, be arguing with the television about, President Harris's policy than wondering whether, my son who's in a gay marriage may have, that overturned, or my, young daughter who is in a state with an abortion ban may need medical care she can't get. Let's focus on the reality of the choice. And I think if we do, we're going to win.
The new book, Something Lost, Something Gained, Reflections on Life, Love, and Liberty, is on sale now. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, thank you.
Thank you
very
both.
much for coming on this morning.
Thanks.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
And still ahead, we're going to go through some new polls in key battleground states.